Commissioner McGee, good morning. Commissioner White, good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Bailey, good morning. Commissioner Krupa, good morning. We have an unidentified telephone number. If you're a commissioner, good morning. Not quite sure who it is.
So are we ready to get started, or should we wait a few more minutes?
I have 9:28.
Okay,
We do have a quorum, which is great.
okay. My computer is always a couple minutes fast.
We do have a couple of commissioners we know we're not coming today, maybe 3 of them, but a couple more we still were expecting.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Commissioner Smith, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Madam Director?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you for the little test there. I didn't know if I was getting through or not. I'm well. I'm really well. I appreciate it.
Chair White, I am showing 9:30.
I am too. All right, so I'll call to order the meeting at 9:30. And could we have a roll call vote, please?
Absolutely. District 2? District 3? Beaumont?
Here.
Calamasa?
Here.
Canyon Lake? Cathedral City?
Here.
Coachella? Desert Hot Springs? Hemet? Hemet? Oh, we can't hear you, Commissioner Krupa. I do see you. Lake Elsinore?
Here.
Palm Springs? Riverside?
Here.
And Wildemar.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Great.
And I
Okay,
do see Commissioner Krupa is not muted, but I cannot hear her, just for the record.
okay. All right, so are there any public comments on items not on the agenda?
We have not received any, and I do not see anyone with their hands raised.
Okay, any additions or revisions to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll move on to number 5, the approval of the minutes from July 27th. May I have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
District 2? Beaumont,
Here. Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella. I didn't see him join. Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Hemet, Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Springs.
Here, present.
We're doing a roll call vote on the minutes, Commissioner.
Oh, sorry. So abstain.
Riverside
Aye.
and Wildemar.
Aye.
The item passes.
Okay, well, item 6 is a quarterly public engagement metrics report from Marla Dye.
Hi, good morning, Commissioners. Lisa's going to get my presentation set up for me. I will be presenting to you this second quarter public engagement metrics, which is for April through June of 2020. Next slide. Perfect. Our quarterly reports are a data-driven approach to monitor the Commission's progress towards public engagement goals, to analyze the effectiveness of its efforts, and to provide transparency into how the Commission is using resources to engage with the public. With COVID-19, this has been an interesting quarter, to say the least. Our engagement has been affected by the pandemic, as you will see in this report. Next page, next slide. Today's presentation, I'll be reviewing 4 sets of data to you, the overall public engagement activities, and 3 of our projects that are under construction, the I-15 express lanes, the 60 truck lanes, and new this quarter, the 15 Railroad Canyon interchange. Next slide. The metrics this quarter declines across all platforms and mixed sentiment. The declines are due to the combination of the public's focus on COVID-19 and the Commission's decision to limit its public engagement efforts during this sensitive time. Despite these challenges, the public was engaged in our Less Traffic, No License to Speed campaign, which kicked off, and we also kicked off our I-15 Railroad Canyon interchange project. The post on the left is a joint campaign with CHP, the 15 express lanes, and the 60 truck lane project to encourage public to slow down. Videos normally do really well on social media, but from late May to late June, the public's focus was elsewhere. Next slide. This is our sentiment graph. It shows lower engagements through April and spikes positive engagement through the construction crew safety campaign that we threw out there during COVID-19 and the start of the construction of the Railroad Canyon project and the support of the 7191 interchange. Next slide. This quarter, we did see small growth in followers across platform, but the engagement sharply decreased. Next slide. Website views declined from last quarter, but the Railroad Canyon project was second to the homepage and most viewed. And then the competition between desktop versus mobile continues to be close and pretty consistent from last quarter. Next slide. We had a slight increase of the newsletter subscribers and the open rate increased dramatically. So I think people have a little bit more time on their hands to read right now. So next slide. So the I-15 Express Lanes project continued and construction workers were designated as essential workers, which helped benefit our projects dramatically. So next slide. So we had increases across the board in social media. So we had an increase of over 375 platforms for all, and over 75,000 unique users seeking more information about this project during the quarter. Sorry, I have a dog and cat fight going on right behind me here. They're growling. Next slide. The 60 truck lanes project. The 60 truck lanes hit its 1-year mile mark this June, and this image was shared on social media to celebrate this milestone. Next slide. So increases across the board for this project as well. Social media followers increased by 183 for all platforms, and we had over 14,000 visitors seeking more information about the project. Next slide, sorry. So our I-15 Railroad Canyon project, it started in late May. This long anticipated project broke ground. So next slide. Our social media following is growing at a great rate and has already surpassed the numbers of the 60 Truck Lanes followers. With this project, for the first time, we incorporated weekly text messages to push out our construction update, and we've seen more requests for text message alerts than traditional email signups. So we actually had 208 text message requests and over 194 via email. So people like it directly to their device. So next slide. This is the end of my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions by the commissioners? I'm not seeing any hand raised. Okay, before we go to questions to the public, I get so comfortable with these Zoom meetings, I forgot to read the instructions, but if you are in the public, you'd like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the participant button on the bottom of your screen. And at the bottom list, please click on the gray raised hand button. If you're using Zoom on your smartphone, tap the screen. A new screen will pop up with the list of participants. Look for the raised hand button on the screen. And if you're calling by phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to comment. So again, no comments by commissioners. And this is a receive and file item, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So let's move on to item number 7, the state and federal legislative update. And David Knudsen, we have a presentation from you.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Chair White and committee members. Happy to be with you this morning. This report will cover legislative activities taking place at the state and the federal level. I'll begin with the state legislatures in the final session, and this second year of the 2-year session has been anything but normal. After an extended COVID-19 recess this spring and another this summer, the legislature has been working within safety protocols that have limited the overall introduction and consideration of legislation. I was recently reminded that there are usually around 2,000 bills under consideration at this time each session. Today, that number has been whittled down to approximately 430. The legislature convenes today. They are actively looking at legislation to include budget trailer bills, but August 31st, 2020 is the constitutional deadline to pass legislation, and the governor has until September 30th, 2020 to sign or veto any bills. Our matrix of bills is attached to your staff report. RCTC continues to engage on the Newsom administration's proposals and rulemaking regarding the delivery of transportation infrastructure across the state and in Riverside County. Earlier this month, RCTC responded to a survey request by the California State Transportation Agency, CalSTA, regarding Governor Newsom's executive order in 1919, which was issued in September 2019. The executive order aims to leverage discretionary state transportation funds to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector and adapt to climate change. CalSTA has identified 10 strategies to meet this executive order, and the survey was intended to gather feedback on these goals. RCTC's feedback underscored the obligation by the state to recognize self-help counties and the promises we've made in voter-approved measures. RCTC will participate in a number of workshops that will influence the implementation of these 10 strategies, and these strategies are also included in my staff report. Over the last few months, RCTC has submitted a number of SB1 grant applications, including to the Local Partnership Program, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, and the Solutions for Congested Corridors programs. These are competitive grants for the State Route 7191 Interchange Improvement Project. Our planning and programming staff have put together a fantastic and competitive group of applications with broad public support. These applications are currently under consideration at the CTC, where staff will make their recommendations public sometime in November 2020. Staff will continue to advocate for these grant applications and current state legislation. Now, turning to the federal update, the federal fiscal year ends September 30th, 2020. This means that Congress has just 38 days to pass appropriation bills that will fund the federal government. Over the last few weeks, the House has passed 10 of 12 spending bills, but the Senate has not yet introduced its own 2021 fiscal measures or announced plans for committee action. At this point, Congress is likely to pass a continuing resolution to keep the government operating at current spending levels until after the November election. A government shutdown is only possible if an agreement cannot be reached on the appropriation bills or the continuing resolution. As I've indicated in previous reports, the FAST Act's current surface transportation programs also expire on September 30th, 2020. While the House has also passed its version of reauthorization in July, the Senate has not yet taken action. Congress will likely provide a limited extension of the current surface transportation programs before it expires for a limited period of time. In addition to working on legislation, RCTC has been working on two important issues with our federal partners. First, RCTC is working with the Federal Transit Administration, FTA, to apply and receive CARES Act funding for our van club, RCTC's van pool program. As a result of COVID-19 pandemic, transit services, including van pool, saw significant reduction in utilization. RCTC is seeking $1.4 million from CARES Act for the operation and management of the van club program. RCTC is working with FTA Region 9 staff to secure as much CARES funding as possible for Van Club ahead of the August 31st, 2020 application deadline. Second, RCTC is engaged with the White House Federal Permitting Improvement and Steering Council to advance a Tier 1 environmental document for CV Rail through the FRA and in collaboration with Caltrans. In the meantime, Caltrans and RCTC continue to push forward on completing the Tier 1 document for this project. Finally, Congress continues to debate the need for another COVID-19 relief package. Last week, Senate Republicans unveiled their own COVID-19 related economic stimulus bill. This proposal, dubbed the Skinny Plan, comes as the House, Senate, and the White House have reached the impasse in negotiations while the Senate remains in recess. The Skinny Republican bill includes unemployment benefits, more funds for paycheck protection, postal service funding. The bill also includes funding for education and COVID-19 testing. As of now, there isn't any funding related to transportation or transit in the Skinny Senate Republican bill. There are significant differences between it and the last COVID-19 bill the House passed in May, the $3.5 trillion HEROES Act, which included roughly $16 billion for transit, while the House and the Senate Republicans wanted to keep the price tag closer to $1 trillion. In conclusion, Congress has a significant amount of work to do before September 30th, and the next few weeks will be a roller coaster of policy and politics. RCTC will continue to actively engage in the process and report back as decisions are made. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Do we have any questions or any commissioners who would like to comment on this? Not seeing any. How about any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
I'm not showing any hands raised.
Okay, then we'll receive and file the item and move on to number 8. Number 8 is a fiscal year 2020-21 State of Good Repair Program allocations. And Eric DeHate, we have a presentation from you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Madam Chair and our Mr. Chair and all the committee members. My name is Eric DeHate, and today I'm going to discuss the fiscal year 2021 State of Good Repair Program allocations. And shortly, I'll provide a little bit of background information, the recommended state of repair allocations, and conclude with our staff recommendations. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background. So the SGR program is a new program that was established through SB1 in 2017. And just like any other program, subject to changes with economic conditions, the SGR program provides approximately $105 million statewide annually to California transit operators. SGR funds can be used on many different types of capital projects, but they also support preventive maintenance and rehabilitation projects. The legislator provides the funding through the same PUC codes as the State Transit Assistance Fund uses, which is one of the two primary transit funding sources. that we use every year. They are PUC 99313 and 99314. RCTC has discretion to utilize the 99313 funding towards each agency's needs and must allocate the 99314 funding as outlined by the SCO. When we get to the next slide, it will show the recommended SGR allocations, which is also attachment 2 to the staff report. The SCO publishes at least 2 funding estimates a year, January and August. Commission staff uses the January SCO estimate for planning capital projects in the SRTP process, but it is subject to change when a revised estimate is released. In this case of this year's August revised SCO estimate, it was approximately 6.7% higher than the January estimate. And unfortunately, this creates a little wrinkle in our process because the revised estimates are provided after the commission allocates all of its transit funds in June. In the recommendations, staff is asking for an increase in the budget to reflect these changes. In addition, staff is seeking an authority above the estimate to handle any increases from revised estimates. We are anticipating a change in the next estimate, which should be in January, in which this authority may be used. Next slide, please. So based on the SCO's August revised estimate, Riverside County transit operators are expected to receive approximately $4.2 million of SGR funds, as outlined above in the table, and also an attachment to the staff report. The majority of the SGR funding is discretionary, as described earlier under PUC 99313, while the remaining is determined by the SCO from the transit operator revenues under PUC 99314. In order to receive this funding, the commission must complete the following actions. First, we'd have to receive and allocate the SGR funds to transit operators based on their local needs, which are shown in the table. And then via board resolution, which is attachment 1, we must approve the annual list of SGR projects submitted by each of the public transit operators and ensure that those funds are expended on SGR eligible activities. We also have to complete an updated authorized agent form and comply with all relevant federal and state laws, regulations, and policies in order to receive the funding. Next slide, please. So staff is recommending that the committee approve the following recommendations as shown above and also outlined in the report, and I'll just paraphrase them for you. First, to approve resolution 20-014, allocate approximately $4.2 million of fiscal year 21 SGR funds to the transit operators. 3, authorize staff to allocate up to 10% of the current estimate. 4, approve the budget adjustment of $258,859 for fiscal year 21 to receive these funds above and beyond what the board has approved in June. And authorize the executive director or designee to submit the required documents to Caltrans and approve these administrative amendments to the operators' SRTPs for these funds. And finally, just being able to forward it to the commission for final action. With that, I don't have any other slides except for the last one, which says I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Eric. Do we have any questions or comments by commissioners? Karen, Supervisor Spiegel, I see your hands raised.
Yes, just a quick question. We are now into a couple of years with the SB1 funding. Are we seeing a decrease? I know with the COVID, we would think we would, Eric, but is there a decrease?
So in related to SGR, the funds actually increased. I was expecting a decrease myself, but SGR showed the estimate of moving up about 6.7%. On the other side, the other source of funding that we received through STA received a substantial cut, about 40% reduction. Luckily, we have enough fund balance within the STA to be able to continue moving any of those projects that any of the agencies needed. And the CARES Act funding did supplement all of the operating revenues that all of our operators use. So while we have a decrease in LTF, Measure A, and STA funds, the CARES Act funds did cover most of the operating revenues for all of our transit operators. There are a few exceptions that don't receive any federal funds, but the majority of them did receive some sort of federal assistance. On the capital side, the two major sources as described, STA and SGR. SGR went up about 6.7%, and that one's really related to vehicle registration fees. So it's a little different than like STA, which is a little bit more related to the sales tax pieces of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? And do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? I don't see any, so we'll, I'd like to ask for a motion.
So moved.
And could we have a roll call?
District 2,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Hemet, Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Springs,
Yes.
Riverside,
Yes.
and Wildemar.
Yes.
The item passes.
Thank you. Item 9 is the approval of Metrolink operating and capital subsidies for fiscal year 2021, related memorandum of understanding and RCTC short range transit plan amendment. And we have a presentation from Sheldon Peterson.
Yes, good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Today I want to bring you an update on Metrolink and review the budget as well. We started the year with a continuing resolution that covered the first 3 months of budget. And this information will be related to the remaining section of the year. Next slide. I wanted to start off by giving everyone a highlight of FY20, which had some interesting things as everywhere else in the world experienced. Metrolink went through some similar challenges. So it celebrated their 27th year of operations, which is another major milestone. It's become an integral part of the transportation network in Southern California. So we're excited to be supporting it as we have since the beginning. When we talk about ridership, Metrolink for the last several years has been doing fairly well with slow and steady ridership increases every year. We were tracking at about 3% growth before the COVID shutdown showed up, and then we took a 90% drop in ridership once people started working from home and all the challenges that went along with that. The net annual ridership dropped about 22% from the previous year, basically because the last quarter of the fiscal year is where we saw the COVID impacts. What was really interesting to find out is when we were running all the trains, we noticed that the people on those trains were the essential workers, both healthcare, law enforcement, and others that relied on Metrolink as their lifeline to get to and from to work. So it was important to keep those operations up and running. And so Metrolink did that as well. Like a lot of other places, we've been focusing on cleaning and sanitizing and social distancing. Metrolink has gone above and beyond to clean the equipment, clean the ticket machines. They have foggers that sanitize the trains every night, and they upped all of their cleaning operations on board the train. In addition, they're focusing on social distance. As many of you have been on the train, sometimes you sit directly across from others. That could be challenging in the circumstance. So what they've tried to do is, even with the ridership drop, they're trying to encourage social distancing by letting people know how busy the trains are. So they have an application called How Full Is My Train, where people can go on and check the specific train number to see if that train is growing in ridership. They're looking at a target of about 30% capacity. Gives people enough room to, sit a couple seats away from everyone else. So they're doing that and giving people the option to choose which train they want to be on. With the immediate COVID response, there was a service reduction of about 30% that addressed a lot of the midday or evening trains, late evening trains. And so that went into effect to save some expenses on March 26th. And then that's the current operating situation that we currently have. What's also interesting is Metrolink tried to conducted a survey to determine once people go back to work, how likely are they planning on using Metrolink again as their source of transportation. It was very positive, with 81% stating that they were likely to return on Metrolink as soon as situations normalized. The reduce and train operations provided a unique opportunity to expand the capital construction efforts and the rehabilitation efforts, which have been continuing just like RCTC has. So we made a lot of progress on capital projects during this period. The other major highlight is Metrolink's getting real close to accepting all 40 of their new Tier 4 F125 locomotives, which are good for the environment and good for the system. Next slide. And this, as you've probably seen in other scenarios, this shows the ridership cliff that we experienced this past year. We were trending up and positive, and then we hit that March shutdown and everything kind of fell through. So this is what we're going to try to build up as we go forward. And it just kind of shows the dramatic impact that has never been seen on Metrolink before. Next slide. Looking forward, the FY21 Metrolink is working hard to implement a recovery plan framework, which focus on safety first. They're looking to make sure the trains are clean, and they will add back those trains throughout the year based on needs, and make sure social distance is available to pull that service back into normal operation. The other highlights that we're working on this year is Metrolink has awarded a number of their key contracts, or is going to. One of them that went last Friday was an operations contract to the current vendor, who actually provided a bid that was lower than their existing contract over the past 5 or 6 years. So that's a good step for Metrolink. They're also looking at their track and signal and infrastructure contracts going forward. So they're going to try to see if they can get similar cost savings with those other programs. Metrolink's also promoting ridership to try to get people back on the train. The first one that they're looking at is, now that kids are back in school or virtually on school, want to try to offer them a break on the weekend. So they're offering a kids ride free weekend program. As long as it's safe, people can go ahead and take the train on the weekends and take the kids out to stretch their legs and do what they need to do. There's also a loyalty program that's going to be launched this year. And they're also looking at a healthcare corporate partner program. The corporate partner program looks at employers and tries to coordinate with them to encourage their workforce to ride the Metrolink service. So they're targeting healthcare and some of those essential workers to make sure that they feel comfortable getting on the train. In addition, we're enhancing the rehabilitation program that'll address both failures of equipment or track or anything else, using this time as effectively as possible to get the system in top condition. They're also working forward on continuing the positive train control, train safety program, and had a major award or decision last week where the FCC allowed the radio frequencies to be used for positive train control in Southern California. This is a major challenge that, for 7 or 8 years, Metrolink's been trying to get this done. So during this time, they've been able to go ahead and make progress on that. Next slide. So as we look, Metrolink's overall budget is about $260 million. Of that, RCTC share will be $23.7 million. As you can see on the right, we have a breakdown of what that looks like for the operating side. It's a little bit of an alphabet soup with our local acronyms, LCTOP, LTF, FTA. So we work through all those to build basically a tower of funding to go ahead and cover RCTC's obligation. The interesting point this year is with the new CARES funding from the federal government, we're using a solid share of about $6 million of that. And it actually brings the federal share of RCTC supported funding up to about 62%, with state and local of about 38%. So that really shows how we're trying our best to leverage the FTA and federal sources to cover Metrolink's operating needs as much as possible. In addition, we're supporting the capital funding requirements for RCTC of almost $8 million. We'll be using the FTA 5337 grants for that as well. That'll include shared track projects across the system, equipment projects, and also some expanded work on the Paris Valley line to assist our program. In addition, with these changes in funding, we'll need to update our short-range transit plan and update the Metrolink MOU with the new funding plan as well. So next slide goes to those action items. Receive and file the Metrolink highlights that we kind of reviewed. Approve the fiscal year 2021 Metrolink budget with an operating funds of 23.7 million and capital funds of 7.9 million. We'll amend the short range transit plan and execute the memorandum of understanding. Next slide. Just a quick summary. I'll be happy to answer any questions, take any comments.
Okay, thank you, Sheldon. Do we have any comments or questions? I'm not seeing any from commissioners, and I don't see any from the public as well.
Chair White, I do see a question from Commissioner Spiegel.
Oh, there she is. Okay, go ahead.
Sheldon.
Yeah.
You know, when we have on that survey that said 81% are likely to return to ridership, did we, on that survey, and I can't remember it being on there, did we ask if some of those were transitioning to telecommute? So I know that during this time, there are many businesses that are reconsidering their organization and restructuring, and many are going to be working from home long past because they're finding it economically and the whole big picture. So did we take that into account at all on the Metrolink budget?
Yeah, I think they asked some questions regarding that, and Metrolink's trying to be responsive, knowing that that's going to be kind of this new normal that we're rolling into. So they're actually going to work out a new fare product. So they're going to offer basically a 5-day pass, which is different than they've offered before. So people who are telecommuting maybe 2 or 3 days a week can buy this 5-day pass and just use it whenever they're going into the office. So this will be cost effective for them, give them flexibility the current structure doesn't have, so that when these people are going into the office, we want them to be on Metro.
I don't remember hearing that at the meetings, but I'm very happy with that, because that was something we took away, and I'd like to see it brought back, is that when people who don't work on a regular basis have that opportunity of having to buy a monthly pass or a weekly pass. So
yeah, I think it's a great move, and I'm excited, and should show some good results. Absolutely.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes,
Commissioner Woods.
thank you. We had $6 million in CARE funding. I assume that was due to a lack of revenue from ridership. And I assume ridership is still not back to normal levels. And I don't know, I just was curious if that CARES funding is coming in the future as well, or kind of what our projection for the future is.
No, absolutely. That's a good point. So the primary use for the CARES funding is the direct reduction in revenue. Traditionally, Metrolink could get potentially up to 40% of the revenue recovered from ridership. This current year, it's looking at about 17%. So the CARES funding is making up that gap in the fare revenue recovery. RCTC received $33 million in CARES funds that we're directing towards Metrolink. We're using about $6 million this year. So over the next couple of years, we'll have additional funding in that CARES pot to apply to the reductions in revenue. Hopefully it'll bounce back quick, but if it doesn't, we're protected either way.
Great. Thank you very much.
Terry, just real quick, Sheldon, I thought the CARES Act funding had to be spent, but we are able to hold that for the next 2 years?
The goal is to spend it as quick as possible. And so we're trying to coordinate with Metrolink to make that happen. So they have a plan where they can use it over the next couple years is what they proposed. We're encouraging them to try to use it sooner when possible. But that is kind of the approach as it is right now.
And did you have a comment?
I do, and sorry, I can't raise my hand. I'm a co-host on the meeting, so I apologize for doing it the old-fashioned way. So a couple things related to CARES Act. Metrolink has already incurred significant expenses that are eligible for CARES Act reimbursement. And so Metrolink is getting the reimbursement from the federal government on those funds. And so they'll have the funding there to be able to, as Sheldon said, to make up that deficit from lost ridership for the next couple of years. Most of our bus transit partners are looking at spending most of their CARES Act money over the next year and a half. So I would say on average, our CARES Act money on the transit side will get us through the next 18 to 24 months. what's really important here is that if ridership doesn't return, we could be in some pretty significant funding deficits related to transit if ridership doesn't return. So without the CARES Act, we would be in a funding, we'd be in a very, very difficult position right now. So this is buying us time to start looking at whether or not there need to be modifications made, whether there can be efficiencies made, and to evaluate what our options are. And here's the other thing too, is it also gives us time to get more information related to our own revenue sources and the whole telecommuting question. You know, we've remodeled our commuter assistance program. So we've got more outreach to employers looking at telecommuting. So CARES Act buys us time to evaluate all of the data related to COVID to see where things might shift and what shifts we might need to make as a result of the impact of COVID. So CARES Act has definitely made a difference here. And I would just point out that one of the things that has been very, very important is that the RCTC board has very conservative and prudent financial policies, and we keep a great deal of funding in reserve. That may frustrate some of our transit partners that we have a lot in reserve, but it feels a whole lot better to have money in reserve so that you can all make decisions that need to be made without having to worry about whether there's funding to keep us going for a couple of months. So the reserve policies are really paying off now as well. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments? Questions? Okay, I need to get a motion, please.
I will move the item.
I'll second.
And a roll call.
District 2,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Pella Mesa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Hemet, Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside,
Yes.
Wildemar.
Yes.
That item passes.
Thank you. Item 10 is a commissioner staff report, opportunity for commissioners or staff to report on attended or upcoming meeting or conferences. Do you have anything to report? Seeing none, I guess we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 10:11. Next meeting is 9:30 a.m. September 28th. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week. Thank you.